At Intel, we see a future where human potential is unlocked by advances in computer vision and AI. A future where billions of hours are spent getting from A to B are transformed into productivity, leisure, and creativity. A future where road accidents are a distant memory. Many around the world share this vision, but placing a few autonomous vehicles on the road won't bring about the autonomous future. Mapping a few square blocks won't unleash its full potential. And testing AV tech on open roads isn't the same as testing in dense urban environments. At Mobileye, we're taking a different route by tackling the hardest parts first, with some of the most powerful computer vision engines in the industry, with technology that's well on its way to mapping the planet, and with a unique safety model that adapts to diverse driving cultures. We're taking battle-tested driver assist technology into the self-driving cars of tomorrow and bringing the cutting-edge tech of tomorrow into cars today to move the world forward. We all share the same vision for the future. At Mobileye, we're turning that future into reality. Mobileye, an Intel company.
Welcome to the Intel press conference. I'm here in the Mobileye garage in Israel, where we are working on the future of mobility. And I can't wait to tell you what we have been up to. You may ask why Mobileye is giving the Intel press conference. First, it's because Mobileye is a growth engine for the company, and Intel is full business. Later today, you'll hear more from Gregory Bryant, where he gives his perspective on the power of computing. I thought it might be interesting to have an outside perspective on what the Mobileye news means for the industry. So I have invited Ed Niedermeyer to join me on stage to help unpack the news. Many of you know Ed from his Autonocast podcast, as well as being the head of communications at PAVE, Partners for Automated Vehicle Education. Welcome, Ed. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to getting the chance to talk. I've really been enjoying some of the videos that Mobileye's been putting out from the testing that you're doing in Jerusalem. It's really impressive to see what can be done with cameras. But it sounds like you're starting to test elsewhere. Could you tell me about that?
Sure. When you think about scale of testing, this is what enables us to test in different geographies. There are two factors. One factor is how general or transferable is your driving policy algorithm. So driving policy is all about decision making, about the car merging into traffic. So if you are overfitting to many driving data, lots of driving data, then you'll need lots of drives in a new location, and that will limit your scalability. The second point is, how fast can you build a high definition map of the new area that you want to test, and if building the high definition map requires lots of manual labor, that also limits scalability. So on both fronts, we made huge progress. On the driving policy, we by embedding our RSS into the algorithms of driving policy, we're able to kind of abstract the problem in a way that is no longer data-driven, and is really Occam's razor. It's generalized and transferable, so we believe we can go from territory to territory without, testing. Second is our REM technology, this crowdsourced idea of using driving assist cameras in production vehicles, sending us snippets of data. After kind of development of 5 years, we have passed a threshold in which we today can build high-definition maps at scale. No manual labor, data coming from production vehicles. We have hundreds of thousands of production vehicles sending us data, and we're basically mapping the world, all automatically, everything done in the cloud. And then came the COVID-19. So the pre-COVID-19 era, if we want now to build a new site, we would send 20, 30 of our best engineers to the new site, but travel is impossible there today. So in Munich, we have two people that are not even engineers, They are field support employees to support our driving assist products with our customers in Germany. So we were able in 2 weeks to ship a vehicle, test it. You know, the mapping is already automatically. We have now about 20,000 kilometers of data just in Munich already mapped. In 2 weeks, set it up and start demonstrating to our OEM partners in Germany. Hundreds of drives already we have been doing there as demonstrations, and tens of thousands of kilometers of driving data just to see how things are going in 2 weeks. So this gave us this feeling that now we can scale. So we're planning China and Shanghai, Tokyo, Paris, Detroit. And if we figure out how to get the regulation with the New York City, with the New York State, we will also plan to deploy New York, all in a matter of the next few months, because those two factors of scalability are practically solved in our development.
You know, unless you're really familiar with AV development, you may not understand like what a dramatic thing that is to be able to do so much in go to a new area and in 2 weeks with 2 employees to be able to do that. And I think, you know, for driver assistance, you know, the idea of a camera-based system is really widely accepted. Again, it's you know, the most common form of driver assistance, but or advanced driver assistance. But when it comes to autonomy, people are a little bit more skeptical, I think, that a camera can really do so much on its own. Can you help explain sort of what is that relationship between sort of the ADAS that Mobileye already has a huge business in and the autonomy piece where you're headed? How do those two interact?
I think it's a great question because it really separates us from most of the crowd. So I believe that camera first is crucial both from a technological point of view, but also from a business point of view. And business also matters, right? So let's start from technology. You know, the question we ask ourselves is if we want to deploy a level 4 car. Now, we measure failure rate in terms of hours of driving. So let's do a back of the envelope calculation to understand what are the human statistics. So if we Google, we'll find out that there are about 3.2 trillion miles a year in the US being traveled by cars, and there are about 6 million crashes a year. So divide one by another, you get every 500,000 miles on average, there is a crash. Let's assume that 50% it's your fault in a crash. So let's make this 1 million, and let's divide this by, say, 20 miles per hour on average. So we get about once every 50,000 hours of driving, we will have a crash. So now let's assume that we have reached that level of performance using a robotic machine, and we deploy 50,000 cars. Now, 50,000 cars, it's not a big number, right? If you want to build a business. So it means that every hour, on average, we'll have an accident, which is our fault, because it's a failure of the perception system. Now, this is, from a business perspective, this is not sustainable. And also from a society perspective, I don't see regulators approving something like this, even though it matches human statistics. You have to be 1,000 times better than these statistics. Right? So this is where redundancy helps us. So we tell ourselves, look, if we build a camera-only system, with a mean time between failure of a square root of what we need. Say we are targeting 10 to the power of 8, 100 million hours. So have a camera system with a mean time between failure of 10 to the power of 4, 10,000 hours, right? And then radars and lidars will be a redundant add-on for the remaining square root, for the remaining 10 to the power of 4. It's like I have an iOS smartphone and an Android smartphone in my pocket, and I ask, what is the probability that both of them crash at the same time? Clearly, it's a product of the probabilities, because we're talking about different modalities here, radars, lidars, cameras. So this is why it's, from a technological point of view, so crucial to do really the hard work, is not combine all the sensors at the beginning and do a kind of a low-level fusion, which is easy to do. It is forget about the radars and lidars, solve the difficult problem of doing an end-to-end standalone self-contained camera-only system, and then add the radars and lidars as a redundant add-on. So this is from the technology. Now, from the business perspective, if you are building a technology which is good only for level 4, then you really need to wait for a time in which level 4 autonomy is prevalent, is ubiquitous. Say 5% of all new cars would be level 4 autonomy. Now, this could take a decade. Now, during that time, during that decade, you'll have zero revenues. Now, it's not sustainable unless it's a government-funded project. It's a national project, So you really need to think about the business if you want to sustain for the long run, and it's not just a science project, right? You want to build a business. Now, it turns out that if you do this redundancy, the camera-only subsystem is ideal for pushing the envelope of driving assist for level 2 systems. Right? This is exactly what we did with winning the design project with the Geely in China. So September next year, this car is being productized at volume production in China for level 2. So the idea is that you have this camera subsystem. Now, since it's camera-based, it's at a consumer price level. So now you have a scalable thinking. And this scalable thinking is really the cure for sustaining such a long time until level 4 becomes ubiquitous. Now, business matters because if you don't have the oxygen for a marathon run, then at some point you'll turns out that it's ideal from a technological point of view, but also ideal from a business point of view.
To me, it's refreshing to hear sort of one of the leaders, if not the leader, in sort of camera-based automated driving, sort of, emphasizing that, even though you can do so much with a camera, that getting safety critical level of reliability does require other kinds of sensors, the LiDAR and the radar. And in fact, one of the pieces of recent news from Mobileye is that, and Intel, is that you're going into the LiDAR business to an extent. Could you explain sort of what the thinking is behind that?
Yeah, so the way we're thinking about it is that consumer AV will take some time. We believe it's going to be 2025 timeframe. Therefore, if we want to start practicing, we need to start with the robotaxi because the robotaxis are less price sensitive in terms of the cost of a self-driving system in a car, and then we can build this radar lidar subsystem in parallel to the camera subsystem. So our first generation of robotaxis are going to be based on the Luminar lidars and also a cocoon of radars around the car. And we have a separate vehicle. You don't see it here, but we have a separate vehicle, Luminar lidars, few radars, no cameras at all, that has the same performance level of our camera-only subsystem. And then at the end of development, a moment before we launch, we put the two subsystems together. Now, in parallel, we're also building second generation, the 2025 timeframe, because as I said before, it's a marathon run, right? You can't think just 2 years ahead. And there we're looking at the next generation, the next technological leap in lidars and radars. So in lidars, it's called FMCW, frequency modulation coherent wave. So it's a completely different principle. It's a kind of a Doppler principle rather than a time-to-flight principle. And it turns out that Intel has a huge advantage over everyone else. Intel has silicon photonics, both in terms of fabs and production and in terms of IP, where you can put active and passive laser elements on chip. And we have a team that has been working for quite a long time in building the next generation lidars. That is kind of where we're targeting this 2024, 2025 timeframe. On the radar side, we are targeting imaging radars. So these are radars that have a much, much higher resolution than today's radars. This is why they're called imaging. It looks like an image. But the twist here is where defined. So rather than analog defined, you simply then through software, you do all the modulations. So this gives you lots and lots of flexibility. And we believe that by 2025, one front-facing cocoon of imaging radars, and one front-facing LiDAR would be sufficient for this radar-LiDAR subsystem, and that will bring us to a cost level together with the camera subsystem, which is good enough for consumer AV, for level 4 consumer.
I think that's sort of one of the things that also sets you apart, is that you are in a position to say, we're not just developing robotaxis.
Yeah.
We're going to build a truly autonomous vehicle that you as the consumer are going to be able to afford by a certain time. That's really kind of incredible. That's what a lot of people seem to want, isn't it?
I think robotaxi would be somewhat of a game change when they'll be ubiquitous, because removing the driver from the equation could reduce the cost of transportation considerably, even rival the cost of public transportation. But having a consumer AV, that is completely disruptive. That's completely game-changing. And I believe that 2025 will start seeing it. It will be at the cost level of a consumer AV. We'll have a number of years of practicing from a regulatory point of view, because regulation is critical here, right? And sometimes it's difficult to leap directly to a consumer level from a regulatory point of view. Going through a regulation of a fleet is much easier from a regulatory point of view than regulating a consumer. So going through the phase of robotaxi is very, very useful also to practice the regulatory front at relatively low volume before you go and jump into the cold water, high volume, level 4, and then hell breaks loose.
And I think the RSS framework that you pioneered, it's being adopted by a number of automakers, I think, or players in the space, is one of the sort of ways forward with that, right? Is that sort of the idea, that this could be sort of a template that potentially maybe regulators might look at?
Yeah, I believe the RSS, the Responsibility Sensitive Safety framework that we built, is one of our most important achievements. I would say this is our top achievement, more than anything else that we have done. Because back in 2017, we realized that the mean time between failure of the robotic agent has a lapse of judgment. Humans have tons of lapse of judgments. This is why accidents occurs. Now, society will not accept a lapse of judgment of a computer. So what do we do about this? Because we're going to deploy an AV car amongst other human drivers. So it needs to behave accordingly, right? It needs to have the values. It needs to behave according to human judgment, because it's going to drive amongst humans. Now, how do you go about this? Is this going to be probabilistic? Are we going to drive zillions of miles showing that we have 0 accidents? And then, we'll convince society that we can put this machine on the road. So we understood that we have a problem. And then when we looked at the space, we understood, that there are traffic laws. And those traffic laws, there isn't much judgment there. Now, if you have a red light, you need to stop. If there is a solid line, you should not cross it, right? But then there is this duty of being careful. You are told you need to be careful. You are told that even if you have the right of way and the other guy doesn't respect your right of way, you should yield. Right? Right of way is given, not taken, right? So this idea of being careful is not mathematically defined, because a computer needs a precise and crisp definition, right? It's not just by collecting lots and lots of data you'll be able to figure out, what does it mean to drive careful. Now, we can go and define it mathematically. And this is what we did with RSS. The RSS defines mathematically what it means to be careful. It understands that humans make assumptions. So we replicated those assumptions in a mathematical way that has parameters, so that we can start engaging with regulatory bodies about the values of those parameters. And then once we have set those assumptions, the framework takes the worst case. That means I don't need to predict what the other guy is going to do, because I'm taking the worst case under the assumptions that have already been agreed with the regulator. So this gave us kind of the Asimov rules, the 3 Asimov robotic rules. So it's a rule-based kind of thinking. How do you define what is reckless and what is careful? Once you define this, you know where the border, where the dividing line is, and you simply don't cross it. And then if the other guy puts you in a dangerous situation, you have kind of proper actions how to get out of it without causing an accident. So we built this theory, and it was clear to us it has to be transparent. no hidden equations, no hidden source. It has to be fully transparent so that we can communicate with regulatory bodies. We can convince also so that we can together work with regulatory bodies in order to standardize it. Because, safety cannot be a secret sauce of an agent, of an actor, because society will not accept it in the long run. RSS I think is one of our crown jewels of achievement, and we deliberately made it transparent. And I believe that eventually it will be standardized. One is standardized.
I want to shift gears a little bit to sort of one of the other pieces you mentioned as being a key enabler of this rapid scaling that you're sort of embarking on, and that's the REM piece, the mapping piece. My understanding is that, and you already described sort of what it's enabled in terms of getting the Munich operations up and running with 2 people in 2 weeks, which is amazing. But for those who aren't as, and I'm surprised that people aren't as familiar with REM. Could you sort of explain it, but then also maybe explain why Mobileye decided to use that huge data to map rather than maybe to focus on things like using that for training data?
Again, it's a great question, because when you 2 uses. Well, the first use that comes in mind, the most natural use, is to do event recording. So kind of find corner cases, cases where, say, the driver intervened, took action, or through other measurements like the braking profile, decide that there is an event, and simply record everything from your cameras. And then when you are connected to Wi-Fi, send it to the cloud. And then in this way, you can have kind of a very scalable way of collecting events and use that to improve your system. It sounds reasonable, but actually it's a brute force way of going about things. Kind of deploy a crappy system, and then in a brute force way, kind of call it beta, and then eventually you'll kind of get into a glass ceiling. Another way of looking at collecting data is to understand what is the source of problems in building a perception system. So in building a perception system, there are 2 things that you need to perceive. One are objects, road users, vehicles, pedestrians, buses, cyclists, and so forth. The amount of data that you need to train a deep network to recognize these objects is not huge. Years ago, at Mobileye, we surpassed human capability of detecting cars and pedestrians, and the data that we had years ago, right? So this is not a bottleneck. What is a bottleneck is all the understanding the semantics of the road. Where are the drivable paths? What is the relevancy of drivable path and traffic in a 4-stop kind of intersection, or what are the priorities? Is my path a priority compared to another path? So I need to yield, or the other guy needs to yield. There are tons of semantic data in a road, delimiters. Where are the kind of the delimiters that places I cannot drive into, like curbs and things like that. It's so detailed that the probability of not making a mistake in a single pass, so kind of in online, the probability of being perfect, again, we want to reach a mean time between failures of tens of thousands of hours, is almost unachievable. And then we told ourselves, well, crowdsourcing, it's not a single pass. I can have zillions of cars passing through a complicated area. I can do something that a single car would never be able to do, no matter how good my perception is. So this switched idea is we don't need data for event recording. We need data to build those maps. Let's call them maps, but they're not really maps. It's not a navigational map. It's what's out there in the scene that is not a road user. Everything. I want to know everything about the scene, all the semantic information at great detail and great accuracy. I want to know where this lane is at a... So the switch of the mind was that we need to build technology that will take information, data collection from cars, but has to be very, very low bandwidth. Because if it's not low bandwidth, we'll not be able to convince our car makers to cooperate with us and send the high bandwidth data to the cloud, because it costs a lot of money, right? So we're talking about 10 kilobytes per kilometer. It's really nothing from a cost of, it's $1 a year on an average kind of mileage. And then do the really hard work. And as I said at the opening, it took us 5 years. We announced RAM 2015. Only half a year ago, we reached a point in which we can truly, without a single manual labor, just automatically, take all those pieces of data going to the fleet. So this is, from our point of view, this is the real use of data collection from cars. It's not event recording. It is being able to build the scene to an accuracy level that no single car can do. This is the beauty of it.
Yeah, I think, anytime someone hears map, they think navigation, and they don't understand that as you said, this is about limiting the complexity that your probabilistic system has to solve for, right? If you know what's established in the landscape. So actually, I did want to clarify one thing that you mentioned, that zillions of vehicles. I'm guessing that's not the official figure. I just wanted to get a sense of sort of what is the scale of RAM? What kind of, how many vehicles today?
So today we have many hundreds of thousands, I think even approaching 1 million vehicles sending data over 6 OEMs, six car makers. Next year it's going to be more than double than that. As of half a year ago, we got about 8 million kilometers of data every day. Now it's much more than that. And we have worldwide coverage. We're talking about something that's truly scalable, truly global, because you can drive everywhere. And Roadbook is the enabler. It's not going city by city. It's the entire planet.
And just sort of get your thoughts about putting all these pieces that we've been talking about together, and then sort of comparing it to the competitive space.
I'll try to summarize what are the key distinctions separating us from all the rest. And it's a small number of distinctions. Each one of them is deep, but it's a small number. Scalability all at once. The second is this idea of redundancy. Camera subsystem, radar lidar subsystem. Next one is our driving policy, which allows us to really be transferable from territory to territory.
Yeah, and if you look at the problems that each one of those things are solving, they are so fundamental to making this technology work in the real world, and particularly at a scalable level. And I think both Munich and just your plans going forward, all of the different this seems to be the most ambitious sort of scaling plan for a level 4 focused robotaxi company in you must be able to do something that others aren't able to do.
No, we have a legacy of 2 decades, so now it matters.
Yeah, I think that's oftentimes a lost sight of new technology. Everyone's focused on the novel, and 20 years of experience of computer vision is nothing to sneeze at. This has been just absolutely fascinating discussion, taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Ed. It was great. It was a real pleasure.